Welcome to Recox, the Inventory Success Podcast, where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and distribute their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at MFD. MFD is the inventory success platform for consumer and B2B companies. What do we mean when we say inventory success? Well, we help SMBs manufacture, finance, and distribute their products across 20 categories. And if you're looking for help to reduce your COGS, or you're looking for inventory financing or selling new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at mfd.com. Our guest today is Adelle Archer. Adele is a CEO and founder of Eterneva. Eterneva celebrates remarkable people and pets by turning their ashes or hair into diamonds. On this episode, we really learn the ins and outs of Adele's supply chain, when it makes sense to outsource versus own, also how to actually produce a diamond, which I thought was fascinating, how this business also runs from a cash flow perspective. So what that actual process is like when a customer first orders all the way to delivery, how long it takes, for example, and also a dissection a bit about the different sales channels that go into Eterneva to find new customers. Without further ado, here's Adele. Adele, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm so good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I know we had this on the books for a while, and thank you so much for being patient with me. I really appreciate it.
I mean, I've just been waiting to talk about manufacturing. So, I'm like super. The day has finally come.
The day has finally come. So you've such a unique product with Eterneva. I think it's probably best maybe to start there in terms of what Eterneva is, just because to really to give folks who are listening really the context in terms of what you're building, because I think it's so different and so interesting.
Thank you. Well, yeah. So, what Eterneva is that we are a celebration brand that when somebody really important or special, a person or a pet, passes away, we can actually make a real diamond from the carbon in their ashes or from their hair. And what's special about it is we really go on this very participatory journey and kind of create a whole experience around the diamond creation process because it's very intricate, as you might imagine. So we have our families getting to receive pictures and videos and updates. We learn a lot about their loved one. We really build a relationship with them. If they want to come to Texas, we're like, come on down and be a part of their diamond process and get a tour of our facility and our lab. So, it's a very kind of hands-on, experiential offering that is a beautiful way to honor somebody that you love.
That's incredible. And so these diamonds, they're above ground diamonds, right?
Yes,
Not
they
okay.
are. They're lab grown. What I would say though, actually, like the difference between our process and regular lab grown diamonds is that we actually use different technologies, and regular lab grown diamonds really like their operations are designed for maximum throughput. So they're trying to grow 100 diamonds in a machine cycle at a time at whatever quality. They kind of cut the best that they can get from the rough diamonds and they sell it at a market value. Whereas with our families, we're growing one diamond in the machine at a time. It's from a personal carbon source. So the material we're working with is different every time. And it's completely bespoke. And so I say it's kind of like buying a mass produced piece of art at Target versus commissioning an artist to do a custom piece in your home. Just a very different kind of overall production process.
So, I mean, I guess what you're implying too with, you're producing one diamond at a time is a lot. These diamonds are all custom order in terms of what to do. Can you elaborate that on a little bit in terms of what that means, and in terms of the overall process from the beginning when someone actually wants to honor a loved one, or and this is the way that they actually choose to do it by purchasing a Eterneva diamond.
Yeah, of course. So, well, first of all, I think what is, again, kind of unique or different about our process is our families are actually ordering a very specific diamond up front. So, if they're like, I want a 1 carat round blue diamond, then we actually get to grow a rough diamond that is going to be able to yield exactly that diamond, which, is no easy feat. When you're growing a rough diamond, just like under the earth, there's always going to be some inclusions in it. And so you're actually using technology to kind of map within the rough diamond, making sure that you can cut that big of a diamond to that shape with really nice clarity standards, and we have clarity guarantees. So if for any reason we actually don't meet that, we'll grow our families another diamond and they get both at the end. So that's kind of, again, like a bit of a difference where we have to hit exact specifications that are determined up front versus kind of seeing whatever we get, kind of cutting it and selling it at a market value. Um, and in terms of our process, the way that it would work for a family is initially they'll get in touch with us. And a lot of the time we like to do a consultation up front because, as you can imagine, like this isn't just making a diamond, this is being the guardian of your loved one for the next like 7 to 10 months. And so you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel confident, you want to understand how it all works. So we walk through all of that with you. And then we learn a lot about your loved one because this just gets to be personal and really special. So that's a really kind of important first step. And then if you're like, yeah, this feels good, I want to explore this further, you'll order our welcome kit. And that has everything that you would need to package up either half a cup of ashes or a cup of hair if you're choosing to do it from hair. We have cubic zirconias in there so you can see different like diamond sizes in person, get a feel for what feels right. And then when you start the process, you'll have selected your diamond, made your payment arrangements, and then you'll be getting the process going. So when we receive the welcome kit back, our first step is just kind of preparing the ashes, analyzing them. In some cases, we're even doing some carbon testing for our customers. If they wanted, to see kind of carbon content, we can do that. And then we go through a purification process. So we're essentially extracting everything that isn't carbon from the ashes. We have a high heat, no oxygen environment that uses a variety of different gases to evaporate everything that's not carbon. So then what comes out the other side is a carbon graphite that we then process and turn into a superfine powder that is going to be capable, usable in a diamond growth process. And then we have these incredible machines that essentially are replicating the same growing conditions as under the earth, high pressure, high temperature, and that graphite carbon actually will grow into a growth cell with a variety of other kind of heat insulating materials. We blend our personal carbon with some generic carbon, and then there's a little sliver of a diamond seed, and that carbon will actually grow on top of that template over time, and it grows into a rough raw diamond. A lot of art and science in this process, like the recipes and being able to grow clear diamonds is quite challenging, and so that's a big part of the process. Then on the other side of getting a rough diamond, we cut the diamond, we grade it, certifying, authenticating, this is a real diamond, here are the specifications of it. And then on Eterneva's grading reports, we're also disclosing this is not just a regular diamond, this is made from this person's carbon. So there's disclosure around that. And then if our family wants support with jewelry, then we also will help them with kind of envisioning and designing a jewelry piece. And then finally at the end, we go home and we call that the homecoming, the day the diamond comes home. And it's super special and really beautiful. And the care team that works with you all along that journey just really works with you to make sure that's a very special day. So end to end, that's the process. It takes like on average 7 to 12 months based on the size and the color that we're doing.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I was going to ask you how to grow a diamond, but you just spelled it out completely in terms of in terms of what the process is. What is, since it is complex, what is, and sometimes it doesn't always seem to get exactly maybe what you were anticipating. What tends to be the yield rate when it comes to when you actually go through the process of creating this diamond that the customer has presented what type of diamond they want, what of the 4Cs, what they're kind of thinking about that suits them, that actually how often or not does that actually work to the customer's liking?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that we've really perfected over time. We call it a regrowth rate. What's the rate at which we need to, grow an additional diamond for the family? And by the way, from half a cup of ashes, we can extract enough carbon to grow up to 5 diamonds. So that's actually insurance as well for our families. Like we intentionally have more than enough carbon. So that way, if we need to do a regrowth and or God forbid they lose their diamond after getting it home, we encourage and support our families to have their diamonds insured through a partnership we have with Jewelers Mutual. So that way, if that ever happens, Jewelers Mutual comes back, they pay for a full replacement value, and then we have carbon to grow from. So either way, but in the regrowth scenario, I would say it's probably about like 10% of the time. And typically it's more when the bigger the diamond gets, it's like exponential, how much more challenging it gets to grow and how much more sensitive it is to having an inclusion that you need to work around and cutting. So, you will see quite a price difference as our diamonds get bigger because, yeah, they're just that much more challenging. And we're factoring in the odds of needing to potentially do a regrowth as the diamond is kind of a bigger diamond. So, but that's another thing that really, I always say that it's kind of similar. Like diamond machines are like ovens, like if you buy an oven, it doesn't make you like a Michelin star baker. So it's really in your recipes and your technique and how you've kind of dialed that in over the years that really is kind of what distinguishes the world-class baker from, the novice baker.
Yeah, that's really interesting about too in terms of price, about why the bigger diamonds are also a lot more expensive. Does it actually cost if you're able to understand like the yield rate or getting it perfect to how the customer wants, how that percentage decreases as a diamond raised? Are there other costs associated when you actually have to produce a big diamond, or is it more so pricing it in that we might not be able to perfect it on that initial size just because it's a lot more challenging?
Yeah, so I mean, it really is. There's a couple different variables with our bigger diamonds. Certainly, yes, you're factoring in the odds of, we may need to grow, one or two another diamond, and that is cost. Our cost structure is very different if we're producing in house versus out of house. And historically, we had done a lot of our production out of house. Now we have a more blended model where we have in house production. So, our biggest cost really, like our biggest cost of goods sold is our growth costs. So by bringing production in house, that really has allowed us to, alleviate some of that external growth costs. So as you can imagine with big diamonds, if the first one doesn't work out, you're paying that growth cost again, and it can be really significantly expensive. So by being able to do more of that in house, that's really kind of like it has been very supportive. So I think it just kind of depends on where we are, whether we're growing, that certain product mix, we're specializing with our in-house capacity and others we aren't. So there can be kind of a higher cost associated to, if we get to redo it again. But beyond that, there's also variable costs around cutting. A diamond gets much more expensive to cut the bigger that it gets. And yeah, I would say that those are kind of like our two biggest drivers is mostly like growth and cutting that would drive the cost up on a bigger diamond.
Got it. No, that's really helpful. What I know when you started off on the operations side, partnerships, external, not doing the actual operations, which makes total sense because it's also proof of concept. Um, how did you find the factory, the organization, the firm that you actually wanted to work with, and how were you able to kind of vet them, or even a few different companies if you had to work with them?
Well, I think we're really unique. Like this is just a funny founding story because it's not like when Eterneva was founded, there were all these places out there that were like, we grow diamonds from dead people, like that was not the case. And actually for the technology that we use, high pressure, high temperature, there like literally weren't even high pressure, high temperature diamond scientists in the United States. They all were international. So a lot of that research actually came out of Ukraine. Originally was where a lot of that science was developed. So you find a lot more scientists typically in like Russia, Ukraine. Now there's a lot of HPHD in China. So a big thing for us was finding, frankly, geographies that we were comfortable sending our loved ones to, where we just felt like, kind of the ethical practices and standards were, to what we would expect. Like, and literally we started this company because I wanted to honor my friend Tracy. And I had her ashes and I was trying to figure out how to honor her. And so I was like, I could make a diamond from the carbon in her ashes. That's amazing. But really, it was kind of that litmus test that I was evaluating. She was our first diamond that we made. And so it was very personal of being like, well, would I trust this company with Tracy, and would I trust this place with Tracy? So it was like finding diamond scientists that were really good in what they did, and there weren't that many of them, in a geography that I felt was like a place that I would trust to send my loved one to. And then that like you could actually enroll and convince them into working on this like crazy wild idea. So yeah, I mean, I remember we were our first partnered growth facility was in Amsterdam. And I like legitimately hunted the scientist down. Like he wasn't responding to my emails. So I flew to Amsterdam. I got in touch, like he was teaching at a university. I got in touch with his like TA. He was able to like get coffee with me. And then I like convinced the TA to introduce me to the guy and basically just like cornered him in Amsterdam. And, but yeah, I mean, it ended up working, and that was how we got our first supplier. And, then kind of similarly, it's just like it was a constant hunt to find suppliers that were, and partners that really shared our values and that were willing to be super transparent. Like that's another thing is like a day one value for Eterneva is like we lead with transparency. We want you to feel comfortable and confident. You know where your loved one is. You know what's going on. You know that we're doing as we say. Like their carbon is going into that diamond, and we need to show that. And so in the diamond science world, a lot of their IP is tied up in, kind of their production methods. So there's a lot of people that aren't willing to show their process. And so that was another kind of layer of like, you got to be comfortable. We'll work with you on what's, kind of proprietary that we're not exposing, but we have to be able to show this. And so, yeah, that was a big part of how we initially started. And, but then there's really not a lot of capacity worldwide. And so we really kind of like worked with all the areas that we were like, okay, this is where we would go. And then beyond that, we're like, okay, I think it's time to start adding some in-house capacity, which then ultimately opened a lot of avenues for us, especially with domestic enterprise level funeral home groups who didn't want to send ashes over borders. So it really kind of opened some doors that I think wouldn't have otherwise opened if we weren't the first company to bring domestic production here to the U.S.
Wow. What was the reaction when you actually met this professor in Amsterdam when you finally hunted him down? Was it something as well that he was that he had already been doing as well with ashes of loved ones, or was that totally new to him?
Yeah, I think he thought I was crazy. For sure. Because I think that's why he didn't respond to my emails. But, it's kind of like just being really disarming and being really passionate. I think passion goes such a long way as a founder of, like you've got to enroll people in your vision. I think if you're onto something really great, that like in the beginning, there's going to be so many people who think it's weird and think it's not going to work. And, my husband, when I told him what, like the business that I wanted to start, he's like, that's so weird. That'll never work, and now he's like, and I'm wrong. But I think that that's just really like what you get to bring when you don't have, the investors and the traction and all the things to go for it. It's just like people just want to be involved in like, they see the vision, they see the passion, and they're like, I want to be part of something great, So I think that's ultimately kind of what got him there after he got over being ambushed.
How are you able to vet these manufacturers for diamonds? I know that the quality and transparency is super important because obviously this is a very, 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 very personal thing, and as well as you said before, when you were analyzing geographies, it was a place that you thought you wanted to make sure that you were comfortable, obviously sharing the ashes of Tracy, and as well as other people to share their ashes with. But so how did you think about it from? How did you kind of do almost like quality control per se externally to make sure that it was up to snuff for you?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I know my operations manager would give you a far more detailed answer to this, but like we're really, really big on, like anybody that we ever work with, if we're like, okay, we're gonna try, a new place that's gonna cut our diamonds, like we go through a very thorough supply chain audit. really understanding their processes, what's their chain of custody protocol. We align on expectations around they can only work on one diamond at a time. So, you don't have a diamond leave a parcel paper and then open another parcel paper. You open one parcel paper at a time, you work on one diamond at a time. And I think core values also is just really important. Like we really do a lot of back channeling, a lot of vetting, background checks, things like that. And then beyond that, we also have a lot of data measurement that we do kind of throughout our process. So, we're just recording a lot of things. Like when we get the ashes, we weigh it and, we'll kind of record here's exactly what, the weight is. And then we go through purification and here's what the, weight is of the carbon. And then we go to our diamond growth. And on the other side of diamond growth, here's how much carbon's left. Here's the weight of that. And then there's even methods, there's kind of like blind testing methods that we can do where there's a way to test if there's what you can't do with memorial diamonds is say, unfortunately, there's no scientific way to say like this specific, personal carbon source that's in this diamond came from this individual person. But what you can do with personal carbon, there's going to be some ratios of C12 and C13 isotopes. So you can actually take a diamond and you can test it for its like isotope, composition. So that's a way that we do blind testing as well. Is just we test our diamonds and make sure for like once in a while, okay, yep, we're good. Like we're all following process and protocols. And then we also have video, throughout the whole process. So we're videoing like all the stages, and that's super important for us. And trying to think of anything else. Like a lot of like our partners are ISO certified for anybody that we're working with. Like we do a lot of stuff in house, honestly, like a lot of our processes in house. But then for those that we are working with, we're just ensuring that they're meeting all the same like criteria and qualifications that we are.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that transition to going in house as well from going external. Because right now it seems like a hybrid, although a lot of it is coming in house. At what point? At what point? And I don't know if it's number of customers or revenue threshold. What point did you realize, hey, I actually need to? There clearly is not enough. We've outdone our supply or the supply in the space, and maybe it's a lot more cost effective to us or to open up our own facility and do it ourselves. At what point in the business did you feel like it made sense to do that?
I think like for us, it was kind of required really for us to be able to grow because at the time there wasn't as much external capacity. We've since unlocked more availability externally, and some of our partners have grown and they've expanded. So I think at the time it was by necessity, frankly, and now I would say the way that I think about it is really like I think a hybrid model is a good model for us where we're not taking all the risk, ourselves, or, increasing CapEx intensity because, as you can imagine, diamond machines aren't cheap. And you also want to make sure that like, you don't want to get your forecasting wrong. If you're buying diamond machines, that take like 9 months to build and you over forecast and buy too many diamond machines, like that could be really challenging too. So, I think we're at a nice sweet spot right now where we've got 15 machines in our Kerrville facility. And then we've got a couple of machines in a new facility in Seattle. And so I think that that's like a nice mix where, a good kind of percentage can be grown in house. And then we also have our out of house and, all together it's a good overall blended gross margin is kind of looking at like, what's the blended gross margin and how does that support the company, our path forward into growth and profitability. But what's nice about having the in-house production is really having a lot of like the control in your, in your future, in your destiny that, you have the know-how about how to grow diamonds and being able to, like we've verticalized all the way down to like our consumable making. So even like the pieces that go into the growth cell that go into the machine, we've developed recipes for those as well. And there's a lot of know-how IP in that, that I think is very valuable. So as a company overall, like I think it's valuable as you think about long term and exits and things like that. You have a lot more kind of IP value that you've developed over time, but then it also just ensures that, God forbid a supplier goes away one day, like you can absorb that, and you just stand up some more machines and you know how to do it. You're not just like sorry out of luck, so yeah, I think it's risk mitigation. I think it's economics improvement. But I think it's also why I like the blended strategy is, it's also risk mitigation and not buying too many machines at once. You get to realize the benefit of those machines over time and kind of absorb that, and then kind of incrementally add from there.
That that makes sense. That makes sense to having most of it done in house, and as well as maybe when you're over capacity, as well using using it externally, which those are already relationships and also suppliers that you trust and you've actually been dealing with for years. So at the same time, makes sense to have a blended strategy. In terms of the main costs for Eterneva, I mean, what I think is quite interesting. I know we might have touched on this earlier, is that the customer pays a deposit, and then of course they're paying, I guess, depending on how they're financing it, throughout throughout like the 9 months. It could be maybe all up front, I'd imagine, or but or it could be in stages. I saw that you were partnered with a firm, so it could be in stages as well. But but the point is that you're actually getting paid in advance, before actually you have to deliver the product. The product doesn't need to be already ready, for example, which most products are, and then you click on it, and then of course it gets delivered to you. So I would just say, from a cash flow perspective, it seems like pretty amazing, as a business. Just from a cash flow perspective, I'd imagine that the key costs then are probably the capex when it comes to the facilities and also the machine, and marketing. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, that's definitely right. I think, like with our business, especially, we have a whole facility that's in Kerrville, Texas, that where we produce all of our diamonds. So there's just kind of a fixed cost, foundation, if you will, that is just kind of a part of the business that as we grow, as we scale, we'll continue to enjoy additional operational leverage on top of that. But there's certainly like there is a lot of cost in running a diamond growth facility, and then I would say, as you're saying, like definitely capex and the cost of capital to be able to buy the capex, and financing costs. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good cash flow kind of model and dynamic, but I would say we do reserve a lot of that for, ensure like covering the cost of production. Um, and it's an important thing for us too, because as you can imagine, like a part of why we collect up front is just we don't ever want to be in a position where, if somebody like can't pay the whole thing, like there's nowhere else to sell their diamond to. And also we don't want to hold on to it, like this is somebody's loved one and we want to be able to return it to their rightful owner. So it just kind of removes that, conflict, but it does allow us to then partner with groups like a firm, because then a firm will actually finance the customer. So they pay a Eterneva, then they finance the customer. So it's kind of a win-win where they can split up the payments, but then we don't kind of get into a situation where if someone, doesn't pay, then we're not delivering their diamond.
Yeah, and you're paid first, right?
Right.
Even before the product is made,
Yeah.
which is great.
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit. I know you touched on it, how you partner with domestic enterprise funeral groups. How does
Mhm.
that work in terms of those partnerships? Is it more so like advertising partnerships of Eterneva, that this might be an option, or if you do want to honor a loved one that just passed away, that Eterneva is a really really unique way in order to do that, in an incredible way, or
Yeah.
how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so we actually originally we started partnering with a lot of independent funeral home locations, and that really allowed us to kind of develop a bit of a playbook and an understanding of how to work with the funeral homes, to best represent this to families. And then we just at really the end of last year, we partnered with SCI, which is the largest funeral home conglomerate not just in North America, but in the world. They're publicly traded, $10 billion market cap, 1,500 funeral home locations across the United States and Canada. And that was quite a process, actually. I mean, in and of itself, like separately, we went through so much supply chain vetting with them. They came and they just like, just absolutely up and down our entire process and supply chain, kicked every tire. Like our chain of custody has to be as good as theirs does, So that was quite an experience. But now working with them, it's really allowed us to apply a lot of those lessons, and really what we've determined is kind of the best way that we work with folks is they'll have Eterneva displays in home typically, and ways that they can be sharing this with families. And then they usually are taking families through kind of a consultation. And so when they get to talking about burial or cremation, they're like, would you like me to set aside half a cup of ashes or a cup of hair in the event you choose to do an Eterneva diamond? And then they'll kind of go into, oh, well, like, what is that? Tell me about that, and they can look at the display, all the things. And then usually if the family's interested, then they'll connect them with us. And then we support with, just ensuring the family's well educated on the process, and, they know who we are, they can trust it, like all the things. We want to make sure that's the case. And then assuming everything is good, then they will, typically the funeral director will take the order, and then they do the ashes collection actually on the family's behalf, which is really nice compared to with our direct to consumer customers, they're handling ashes. So then the funeral home will send us the ashes, and that's when we start the process. And then like business model kind of structure wise, like essentially they get a cut. So the funeral home gets a commission, and then we also commission the funeral director. But yeah, that's kind of typically how we do it.
What would you value more? $100 of COGS, $100 of cost of goods sold of Eterneva. Maybe that might be thousands of dollars since it's $1,000 for a diamond, or or the equivalent of thousands of dollars in cash.
Cash.
Cash,
Yeah,
okay.
cash is king. More cash is better than less cash, cash sooner better than cash later. I forget, there's all the four principles of cash. Solomon's rules of cash is yeah, guiding principles should be for all entrepreneurs.
It's really interesting how people have answered this question, because this is the final question on every episode, and
Yeah.
it's funny because cash is king. Also, with COGS too. If you have COGS and you have a great product, then and you have margin, then of course that is worth more
Yeah.
than the cash as well.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of right or wrong way to do it, but yeah.
So
Anyway,
funny.
that's
I
very,
love
very
it. I love it.
cool.
It's definitely
Cool.
like a manufacturing nerdy question. I like
I
it.
know. Very, very much so. Very, very much so. Adele, thanks so much for your time. This has been
Yeah,
tremendous. Thank you.
absolutely. Of course.
And there you have it. Adele, thanks so much for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed that. This was certainly a category we haven't covered before. And it was so interesting to hear how Adele is building Eterneva, and also how she even got into this space. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And also, if you can give a like to this episode as well, that would be amazing. You can also sign up for our events at manufacture.com/events. Thanks for listening.